Gut punched, Alzheimer's, and caregivers. Navigating the insidious illness of Alzheimer's is something nobody asks for. The disease sneaks up on you and your loved one, and it feels like you've been sucker punched in the gut. Then you ask, where do we turn for help? Who do we call? What do we do? These questions and more are what we hope to answer and give you some direction and hope. Now let's join our host, Jeff Edwards.
Greetings and welcome. What's going on? If you're with us today, you're probably looking for information on Alzheimer's and or caregiving. Well, that's why we're here, sharing what we know, sharing what we've experienced, and sharing how the information may help you. Why are we doing this, you ask? Because we wanted to give back, to help people who are just entering a phase in their lives that they will have to become a caregiver for a loved one who may be suffering from Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. They may not know what to do next, or where to turn for help, or even how to make it through the next day. That's why we're doing this. We always talk about the two rules that we follow here at Gut Punch, Alzheimer's and Caregivers. Do you know them yet? 1, you have to take care of yourself, because if something happens to you, who is going to take care of your loved one? And 2, you can't do it alone. You need help. Find a good caregiver group, network with friends or relatives. Now, in this episode, we'll be reviewing an interesting article about brain toxins and deep sleep, and we'll be discussing frontotemporal dementia. Now, we talked about it way back in episode 3. We heard about primary progressive aphasia, the second major form of frontotemporal degeneration that affects language skills, speaking, writing, and comprehension. For example, Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams both suffer from this. But we really have not addressed the behavioral variant of FTD. The hallmarks of BV-FTD are personality changes, apathy, and a progressive decline in socially appropriate behavior, judgment, self-control, and empathy. People with BF-FTD typically do not recognize the change in their own behavior or exhibit awareness or concern for the effect their behavior had on the people around them. This is a very nasty variant of FTD. So let's get at it. This is from Vital Signs. Date, June 28th, 2024. Vital Signs is a program hosted by Epic TV. They have a lot of great videos. Can Alzheimer's brain toxins be cleared by core nutrients, deep sleep? Well, is Alzheimer's disease a result of toxins that trigger brain inflammation? Can nurturing brain lymphatic flow boost toxic clearance? The body's internal system of drains and aqueducts, the lymphatics, has been known for some time. Brain lymphatics, though, are a new discovery, and their role in diffusing conditions like Alzheimer's has only just started to be understood. If tau particles can't get cleared from the system, they build up and become toxic, says Dr. Gerald Lemole, retired professor of surgery at Thomas Jefferson University. They bundle up and kill nerve cells, he adds, highlighting one scenario where blocked lymphatic flow could trigger brain inflammation and subsequently Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Lemole enlightened to the import of body lymphatics in the earliest days of heart transplant surgery in America, when the first round of successful transplant patients all died within 2 years. His investigation found a failure of lymphatics to be the reason. As such, Dr. Lemole looks on with interest as the healing potential of brain lymphatics further unfolds through research. A University of Rochester study shows the freer movement of cerebral spinal fluid through the brains of mice when they are asleep. We know that the best deep sleep is the non-REM stage, 3 sleep, and that's when 70 to 90% of the clearance occurs. Very little occurs when you're awake, says Dr. Lemole. Apart from getting the right kind of deep sleep, what other dietary and lifestyle factors known to enhance body lymphatic flow could also enhance brain lymphatic clearance? Dr. Lemole has also served as professor of surgery and chief of cardiac surgery at Temple University. He joined with Vital Signs and Brendan Fallon to introduce brain lymphatics and how they might be harnessed to prevent Alzheimer's disease.
We'll be right back to Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Are you the caregiver for someone living with dementia? You're not alone.
I was a caregiver for my wife for 10 years, and it was a lot of work.
I'm a caretaker for my wife who has Alzheimer's.
I'm a caregiver of my husband that has CTE, and it's incredibly challenging.
The Dubin Center in Fort Myers has been offering free educational classes and support since 1995.
The Dubin Center has helped me exponentially with so many questions answered. It's just been great.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Today we'll be speaking with a gentleman whose wife of 49 years, a 40-plus year nurse who was very good at what she did, has been struck by BVFTD and what he experienced and is experiencing in living with and caring for her. Mark shared with me that it was his grandson who encouraged him to share his story because if it helped one person, it would be worth it. Now let's let him tell you his story. Welcome, Mark. How you doing today?
I'm well, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and sharing your journey with your wife. Now, you and I have spoken before, and we just met actually yesterday. But will you give us some background, a little bit of background on yourself and your wife, and we'll get into your story.
Sure. My wife, Karen, and I met over 50 years ago. Well, we met at college. And I tell people more recently that I remember the day I first saw her, what she was wearing, exactly what it was. And then a few years later, we married and raised our family. We've lived all over the U.S., started in Alaska and down here to Florida for a couple of years, but a lot of places in between. I recently relocated because of my wife's condition to Illinois, where our daughter is, being a little closer to family has been helpful. You know, Pam was a nurse for over 40 years and probably one of the most caring people I've ever met in my life. You know, I think back on our life and, you know, I see that, you know, she was the reason for a lot of joy that we had in our family. You know, I was the dreamer and she was the one that was kind of the rudder of the ship. So it was a good blend. And I spent 35 years in aviation, working for a major airline, and then retired 10 years ago, thinking that we'd be traveling the world in retirement life, but didn't quite work out the way I was hoping.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
When and how did you come to find out that your wife had frontotemporal dementia? Because that's a strange one.
It is. You know, it took me a while to even be able to pronounce or remember exactly what the doctor had said. But it goes back probably more than 10 years. You know, Pam was a nurse, as I said, and she was teaching nursing at a college level and then also working for someone that she had met in Department of Youth Service in a lockup unit with teens. And so she was splitting her time, and we were also started building our retirement home in Maine. So we had a lot of iron going on in the fire, and it may have caused me not to realize some of the changes, but we had visited our daughter at this time. And she said to me afterwards that she had noticed a change in her mom, primarily in like attitude, you know, not necessarily behavior, but that she, you know, her wife was always a very confident person. She was noticing not the same type of confidence than this sense of worry about different things. So when she said, Dad, you should probably have, you know, talk to her doctor and see what's going on. So I did. And they recommended behavioral health to take a look at it. They diagnosed her with, which is, I understand now, a precursor to different types of dementia, but they said that she was suffering from depression and anxiety. And I noticed more the anxiety based on what this was saying with my daughter, not as much type of depression, but that went on for a number of years. And then probably around 2020, I started to notice she was enjoying life more. So some of that shift from being depressed or anxious about things started to seem to disappear, and she was more happy, more outgoing. Even the children started to see that, but they too, at the time, were a little bit more concerned about what they were seeing behavior-wise. And so Pam had been going to different doctors for different physical ailments. They recommended to see a neurologist. So we were doing that back east, and then she decided she wanted to go to the Midwest, where we had lived for a period of time, and saw a neurologist there. They went through the process in the office and then did a neuropsych exam and brain scan. After that, said that she had major cognitive impairment and most likely FTD. So we've never actually gotten a diagnosis for FTD, but based on everything with symptoms and so forth, it's more likely that.
Right. They say that's one of the tougher ones to actually diagnose. And in some cases, they really can't tell until the person dies and they do like an autopsy and check the brain.
Right.
That's tough because you just have to go on what they're telling you.
Sure. And at one point, I was really trying to get the diagnosis, and a couple of gentlemen that also shared their wives had FTD suggested that getting the diagnosis might have some level of reassurance for me, but it probably wasn't going to benefit me or my wife in the long term to get that. So I was trying to stop that because she was very reluctant to see any more doctors that dealt with any kind of brain issue.
Right. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about. How did she react when she was told she had FTD? Did she rebel or say, no, I don't have it, or just...
Yeah, absolutely. And that was so frustrating for me, Jeff, because she was the voice of reason in our marriage and our family, and she had that medical background. And so when she had promised when she got the diagnosis that she'd get a second opinion when we went back east, and that never happened. And I remember saying to her at one point, if the things were reversed and a doctor told me that I should get a second opinion or made it to a second opinion, you'd insist that I do that. She wasn't having any of that. She started to point some of the neurological issues towards me, saying, because she could see some of the stress that I was under trying to deal with this. And in her mind, that was evident of something that was going on with me. So she really just didn't want to focus on that in any way, but continued to go to medical appointments for other physical type examinations. And so, my daughter had said jokingly to me at one point that anytime she was on the phone with my wife, she would describe something that was going on with Dad and their concern for that. And, at one point when we went to visit and she could see everything was okay, she said, Dad, I wasn't sure if Mom was going to say, yeah, Dad's in hospice, because of the way she was describing the situation, which I really wasn't aware of at the time. And then came to realize that that's something that's very common with people with any type of dementia, but particularly with FTD.
Yeah, they don't want to accept it. There's a term, and I don't recall what it is right now, or transference or something like that. I think that might be the word.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not me, it's you. You need it. That's always tough. It's denial. And so they pick up on...
Well, the brain doesn't even allow them to really understand that what we would describe as denial. The brain's just not functioning to the point that they don't realize that.
Gotcha. Well, obviously you went to and did some research, but what else did you do when you learned about the diagnosis? Did you have anyone who could help, or was it go at it alone? I mean, you have children that are grown, and they hopefully will help.
Yeah. My son is in the military and he's in medical field. And so he had done some work to find a doctor that was both a medical doctor, neurologist, and a psychiatrist that was accepting new patients. So I spent a lot of time explaining to this doctor what was going on. And when I knew I had to approach Pam in a way that would allow her to see the benefits of doing this. And I tried, but there's no way she was going to assist, or do anything in that regard. Then, because we were on the East Coast at the time, we were in Boston, I did some research and I saw that one of the major hospitals there had an FTD unit. So they had a core of medical personnel, from doctors to psychologists to sociologists and so forth, a pretty broad team that was part of this newly formed unit. I can't remember exactly when, but I contacted them and I was explaining that I knew it would be very difficult for me to get my wife there. And what I was trying to, in a sense, was get some more information for me. How do I deal with this type of situation? My wife and I had always managed any kind of problems in our married life in a cooperative manner. And now here I am being the person that has to use reason and logic, which is really her side of handling things. And ultimately, even though they had a support group process within that, they were saying that that was available if my wife became a patient of theirs, and they could, handle it from that perspective. And that was so frustrating for me, that here I am in a place that I could actually go to and try to get the support for my wife and for myself. And it just was a dead end. And that really frustrated me.
I can understand that, yeah. I know you ended up with the Dubin Center in Fort Myers, Florida. How did that come about, and how have they helped you?
Well, I after that experience of not getting the support I needed from the hospital, I went online and I actually sought out different things that were there. I think it was AFTD group, national group, that had told me about, because I knew I was going to be coming down to Florida for the winter. And they had me reach out to that group, and I did that by phone and actually participated in one phone session, the first one. So when I got down there, it was just a wealth of help and support. Not only the support groups, but they also had the classes to take, and arming yourself with information is so critical. And I remember the neurologist saying, if it was FTD or this type of thing, get a financial house in order, get legal matters taken care of. And that was, as your title of the podcast goes, that punch for me, realizing how serious this was. And then having them say there's no cure, there's really no treatment, although there's some, but in essence, that's not a treatable disease like what we're used to.
Right.
And that it had a relatively short lifespan for this type of disease. So, I've told people, even those that aren't in the Florida area that are going through this or have a similar situation, that reaching out to the Dubin Center is something that they'll never regret, because there's just people there that have compassion and an understanding and are there with you and for you and helping you in this journey that no one wants to be part of.
Did you take one of the caregiver courses that they had?
Yeah, I did. I went to, they had a symposium at one point, attended that, and I did the Savvy Caregivers class.
Okay.
I did it mostly with women, and I found when I joined the men's group how beneficial that was. I mean, most of the time men aren't going to sit around and share a lot about their emotional side, because everyone is in this situation together. I think has been a surprise in some ways for me how therapeutic it is.
Yeah, very
to
much
listen
so.
to somebody else that is going through something that's different than you. And in some ways, sometimes I think it's even worse than what I'm going through. They're able to talk about it and in a sense, with strength to others that, this is a tough challenge, but, it gives you strength.
Yeah, it does. I would agree with you when we talk about when you were in some of the classes with the women, they tend to talk a lot more and open up a lot more than the men do. I think that's just the way we're built. Early on, when I got involved, we would go and they would separate, the caregivers with the patients. Majority were women. And I just heard some stories that would bring tears to my eyes, but then sometimes it's something that was so funny would make you laugh. And it was like, and you feel for these people because I felt the same way as, whoa, I don't have it nearly as bad as some of these other people.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't communicate in our caregivers men's group that we had.
Yeah.
I love to go, and I don't necessarily say a lot because I'm always taking notes. I'm still learning. As much as I've researched my side of the deal, I just want to listen. I learned a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if I told you that when we spoke yesterday or somewhere along the line, that I actually made an appointment with an attorney trying to get everything in line. I thought I was fine. I think, the few things that I did, and I'm saying, whoa, wait a second. I need more than that. Let me do this. But that's something that you don't know to do. You live your life and all of a sudden you have this major illness and you go, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
That's what I felt. My first thought was, I think I Googled it or maybe I edged it. I don't remember which one I used, but it was like the Dubin Center. I went there the very next day, just started asking questions, and they gave me so much literature and so much help. I mean, invaluable. And that's kind of what you need.
Yeah, the nuggets of information that apply to you are just happen so frequently from one session to the next. And then I also look at those that have lost their spouse and still want to participate in sharing their story and their support of those that are in the midst of it. And to me, that is pretty impressive. I was part of I attended a single support group in another location because I knew I wasn't going to be here in Florida on a full-time basis. Even though it was helpful, I think there's a few dimensions to the support groups that I've seen at Dubin that make it very unique and powerful. We're so benefited by that.
So what are your plans? You and your wife are living up there in a call it facility, but I know you told me what it was.
We were down here. Our daughter was expecting a child, so we've always tried to support her and the family during that time. So we relocated up to the Chicago area. There was a retirement community that has independent living right up to hospice care. And you could go in on a temporary basis for 90 days. So we talked about that as a family, not with my wife, and none with my wife. Agreed that it would be worthwhile to test to see how that was. At the end of 90 days, you had to make a commitment to it, which seemed like it was moving in the right direction. But towards the very end, my wife became apprehensive about doing this and doing it now. We should do it at a later time. Long story short, with the help of staff there and significant help from my son, who she listens to the most, we were able to make it permanent. So we're in an independent living situation there, but long-term, it has memory care, assisted living, hospice care, and so forth.
That's really good.
Yeah, even though it might not be perfect for right now, I think long-term, I'll be glad that we made the decision, because the neurologist that I saw down here, who had a father that had experienced dementia, said that one of the things he sees in his practice is people wait too late to make some of the decisions that I wish they had made sooner. And moving into a facility is what his parents had done, and he said it was very helpful for their long-term care and staff's long-term care.
Yeah, because you don't know how quickly they'll turn, and you're stuck if you don't plan. And that was one of the things I've learned from going to these groups is much planning as I can do. I mean, things will change, but as much planning as one can do, try to make lists. My guest last week, she talked about making lists. So you don't have to do it all and find people to help you. That's what we always talk about. A gut punch, because you can't do it alone. You need help.
No.
We think we can, but we can't. And so you say, okay, I can do this, this, and this, and take some of the pressure off, because on a day-to-day basis, when you wake up, you don't know what you're going to find. I always think of Tom Hanks' character, Forrest Gump, but that's how it is. And everybody goes through different things at different times. It's always good to have somebody to share with and communicate with, whether it be a friend, even if, you get away from your spouse for a little bit. One of the gentlemen that we spoke to early on in the program, he used to take a half hour, like once a week, and meet with a friend. Somebody came in, watched his wife, just so he can communicate. You got to get it out, because otherwise it'll drive you nuts.
And I think that's one of the good things about doing, is that they, in those classes, talk about the benefit, actually requirement almost, of putting yourself first and taking care of yourself. Because if you don't, it's real easy to get run down, real easy to start to lose your perspective on what you're trying to do. And when you find that you refresh yourself with whatever's going to give you that energy, you're able to look at the next day with a much greater perspective. Not kind of get lost in the daily routine that sometimes can be nerve-wracking.
Yeah. What would you like to share with our listeners? What would you like them to know about the journey, and what advice would you share?
So, I used to think that there was nothing to prepare myself for what I'm engaged with right now. And as I've looked back on my life, looked back, a time of our marriage, I realized that's not really true. We have ups and downs that we go through in life. And for me, I was in the military. I look at some of the things that occurred then. I was significantly involved with 9/11. One of the things that I've learned from different experiences, that you're going to be placed in uncharted waters at some point in your life. And so looking back, seeing some of the things that I had to face that I didn't know how I was going to get through it, is similar to now. I used to joke with my grandson. I probably learned humility or experienced humility in a different way. I remember joking to my grandson saying that, as an Irishman, we don't have a whole lot of humility, but the little bit that we have, we're very proud of. And I remember I said that to him when he was 10, and I could start to see the expression change on his face, and he realized that it was my Irish humor coming in. And we'd probably say, why me? This isn't what I wanted. But we probably all have experiences in our life that are going to help us through this. Like I said, I was a dreamer. I was a problem solver. And I can't dream my way out of this. And I really can't problem solve the specifics of this disease. But like we just mentioned, doing the best I can to take care of myself, and realize that my life has been pretty good. And a lot of that has to do with my wife and the person that she is, and helped me become the person that I am. So I say now it's my turn to roll up my sleeves on some days and just do the best that I can.
That's good. Powerful. Yep. We'd like to thank you, Mark, for your time and sharing part of your life and the journey with your wife as you battle FTD, an insidious disease. And we wish you the best, and to be strong in the battle against this illness, and comfort for you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, thank you for your time, and it's been wonderful talking to you. Well, that will about do it for this episode. We hope that if you know someone who has a family member or friends who are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, that you would let them know about this podcast. For more information, you can check out the Alzheimer's Support Network at https://alzsupport.org/about-us, or the Dubin Center at thedubincenter.com. And to find your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, you can visit alz.org/local-resources/find your local chapter. Now, if you have questions or thoughts about Gut Punch, Alzheimer's, and caregivers, or if there is a specific topic you would like to know more about, reach out to us. The website is gutpunch.com, and the email address is gutpunchedac@outlook.com. A special shout out to Rick Peterson, Ora Santana, Gentry Thomas, Dan Moser, the Dubin Center, and my wife for their tremendous help and support making this podcast possible. Thanks for joining us, and please come back again for more. God bless.
This has been Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, with your host, Jeff Edwards. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to us on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. If you have a question or want to get in touch, our email is gutpunchedac@outlook.com.